Good morning, Chris.
We're lit up.
Season 3, episode 41 / summer school / decoded podcast. Funny thing happened yesterday. You and I were chatting on Twitter, and then all of a sudden we're talking on the telephone, which was interesting. And
I started to realize how not good I am at it. I'm starting to realize
talking on the telephone.
Yeah, I'm not as. I don't know if you start to lose some skill sets there as far as talking on the telephone. I just couldn't make it work. I couldn't understand why my tech wouldn't work. I was craving a dial-up just to make it simple.
Well, it's funny because before we actually spoke directly, so you called me, I called you, and your cell phone would send me right to your voicemail. So I'm like, well, this sucks. And I messaged you, and I'm like, I keep getting your mobile device message machine thing. It won't ring. And then I said, call my home number. And then it's hilarious. So the phone rings, and when it rings long distance, we tend to not answer it because it's usually marketers or whatever. But it rang once, and I picked it up right away. And lo and behold, I'm sitting there in the kitchen, and my son comes down the stairs, and he looks at me. He's like, "Who are you talking to?" Right? I'm like, "It's my buddy Chris." And it's that whole they want to know right away. They won't wait until the end of the call to ask. They want to know now. Who are you talking to? But it was interesting because even my family was like, it was like I was a dinosaur. What's he doing over there? And he's on the landline. Then there's even, you can interpret that a particular way in my house, right? Like if it's a cell phone, it's like, oh, it's probably Clough or his buddy from work. But when it's the landline, then I'm really messing with people. They're like, long distance with a landline? Oh, it must be his mom, right? It must be grandma, because that's how I talk to my mom. But anyway, long story short, it was great talking to you yesterday. And you and I think for the last 24 hours have engaged in some really deep discussion around a variety of topics, which is awesome, right? Because it makes life more enjoyable to reflect and think at deeper levels and higher levels. It's not just always, it's nice to just not always talk about surface stuff. It's nice to go deep sometimes. And you and I, it's almost, but now I feel like I need a break. I'm like, I can't talk to Clough for the next 2 days because we might say something that's going to activate a deeper discussion. And do we really want to go there? But long story short, I'm appreciative. It's good stuff, especially with the ministry announcement the other day regarding back to school and what it's going to look like. And I told you earlier, and I'll say it on the podcast, I've let go of it. I've put it down. That doesn't mean I'm not going to retweet good stuff that I see or comment, but I'm just putting it down. I'm going to let my association fight the powers that be with regard to what many of us believe is needed to do this right. I am excited to go back. I'm excited for some kind of normalness to school, and I'm excited with the challenge of teaching in this new way, but I'm worried, and I don't want to go with my worry right now because that could open up a whole can of worms and take up the whole podcast. But I have a worry about the way teachers operate and the way we do things. So it's nice to have you and I chatting up some decent stuff around some heavier topics that get me thinking. Do you want to, is there a direction you want to take to start a podcast?
Okay. So, I'm going to frame this up a little bit. So you and I have we've always been, okay. So we've talked a few times about our process of using social media for professional learning, for personal use, our preference of platforms, sort of figuring out what different platforms mean. Does that make, depending on, a platform, are you sort of having particular behaviors there or certain creativities, or you're looking for certain content? And I think these are always good ways to look at social media. And it also helps to keep important for me to keep social media not a place, but a tool. Like, I don't want the actual social media to become the destination. I need it to be the tool so it stays closer to my expression, my connection. You've said it before, I've said it before. So it stays closer to our relationship building. And that's how I sort of look at social media. The second layer to it is that using social media to increase the likelihood that I'm going to make in real life friends, whether I'm going to meet them face to face, but that I get the sense of connection that we are real life friends. I sort of, I've come to realize that that's in me. Like, I do feel like I can make real friends through social media, maybe meet them in face to face one day, maybe not. So sort of looking at how authentic and how safe do I feel, and sort of sharing the, the soft bits, so that you can, you've mentioned this, sort of remain vulnerable, but remain human and approachable. So I'll set that as the first context. You and I have been in several conversations where we sort of observe how social media can create a persona. Other people have called it a brand, but it's basically your digital self. So, observing how other people kind of operate within that context of what I was just saying, like, how are other people using social media? And is it a place? Is it a tool? And then how are they sort of using those tools to build relationships? So this is all the big lead up to our conversations this week of noticing ways that social media are being used that seem to suggest there's a new fluency emerging. So, and it's almost like a tactic within the fluency. So what I've picked up on and noticed is that there seems to be a trend. There seems to be a trend of kind of using social media as a confessional space, and not to make it too mystical or, let's say, spiritual or religious, but just noticing that sort of confessional element popping up in streams where it seems all of a sudden. Now, in some cases, and to give an example, in some cases, some people are kind of posting up about their worst day ever. Like, that's one version of this, worst day ever, and that's just the post on social media. And then you sometimes have the list of people, checking in and seeing how the person is doing. On the other end of the continuum, you have individuals that are posting up about big life-changing events, like the death of a close relative or of a loved one, or being hurt in an accident, or perhaps even live tweeting from their pre-op, and they're just about to go into surgery. And in between those sort of like two spaces of just having a bad day, a sort of random kind of drop, and these other like big life-changing kind of confessions, there's something in it. And you and I kind of talked about, this kind of triggers a bit of an a-hole factor, like just by even noticing it and wanting to ask questions about this fluency that's emerging, where individuals are, as a result of these big confessional moments, are gaining clout. They're gathering new followers and friends. And in several of these instances, these individuals already have some type of a brand or a product that is attached to their social media feed. So the thing that I wonder about is about the impact there of being that vulnerable, that authentic, and if there's space to talk about this as a marketing tool. Is it a marketing tool and being authentic and being honest and relationship building? Is it tactical? As in, this is a new fluency, a new tactical fluency of kind of using your suffering to gain clout. And is it completely unknowing? I know that for me, as I've taken no courses in design whatsoever, but in using my Instagram account to sort of push out poetry, when I'm using stuff on the creative, I sort of start to all of a sudden think, well, that doesn't seem balanced. And I don't know, the rule of threes. And I've never taken courses in this, but I've kind of picked up pieces here and there. So when I stop and actually think about my thinking, I'm like, damn, like I'm doing design things. Like I know I have to be a better designer, but I don't have the language to speak about my design. And I wonder with this new fluency in social media, like people are kind of using the tools. So there's kind of like an infectious kind of an element here, as in you see one person posting up their confessional and it opens up the possibility that you could use that too. And I think that's, I don't know, is that a lead in? And again, this is a discussion that has a high potential to just, Chris is an ass. Like, why would he even sort of want to unpack this? But I am really, really curious about it. And I'll start from center because it's, if I craved that space for a confessional, I would not likely post it to social. I would, if it were, it would be a DM somewhere, and it would be with the intent of not just dropping it. Like I wouldn't mic drop it, which is one of the other kind of elements that kind of happens here. Individuals drop it there like a bug bomb, and then they don't really engage in any of the discussion or the feel goods that come afterwards. It's just kind of hearts and thank you hands, heart, thank you hand, heart, thank you hand. And there's something in me that thinks that if you do sort of put something like that out into socials, there's a responsibility there to play a support person for somebody else. If you risk that, to put that out into socials, that someone else may want to have a conversation about it. And what's interesting, in a couple cases, individuals have put this kind of information out there and their DMs are closed. So for me, I see somebody put, my son was in a car accident, send your prayers, and their DMs are closed. Well, I'm more likely to want to connect with you personally and send you a direct DM. Now, I recognize that's everyone's right. You don't have to have your DMs open. But it is fascinating to me that on one hand, being completely open to share with your followers, and then on the other hand, your DMs are closed and there's no way to actually talk one-to-one with you about this. Like if my son was going through the same thing, I'm the person that's not going to post on your timeline, but I may crave to sort of share the experience and kind of figure this thing out together. So this is it's just kind of an observing thing. And I might be just jumping on this bus. Someone's, listening to our podcast and saying, Klaus, this has been going on forever. Like this is something that has been going on forever. And you're just kind of noticing it now. So I don't know. That's my lead. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are this, and a couple of things you've said have activated actually certain thoughts or ideas that I've never considered before. So the first thing is, maybe I provide kind of an example. So somebody tweets out something like, and I'm not trying to be funny here, okay? My friend's uncle passed away today due to COVID. And that's it. There's no more information. That's the tweet. And you see that the tweet all of a sudden has numbers behind it. It's been retweeted like a lot of times, favorited a lot of times. So now it's popping up in people's feeds because the algorithms, right? They're like, oh, something's going on here. We need to keep pushing this out to people for people to see it because people are seeing it and doing something with it. And we need to keep that going because obviously there's something going on here. Mm. So that's the first layer. So my first thinking is, and it is a bit of the a-hole factor that you and I have talked about, because what is it about this tweet? What is it about this tweet that resonates with people, number one? What is it about this tweet why was it put out in the first place? Because like you said, if you want to say something to this person directly, but you can't because there's a wall there blocking you. You can't do it. So you could follow them, but then they'd have to follow you in order for you to send them a message, and they don't follow you. So you're kind of left like, this person has disclosed this information for whatever reason, and now you feel, because one of the reactions is to provide support, to provide positive energy, to provide positiveness or empathy or something to this person,
Mhm.
but you can't, because there's a wall there. And whether the wall is there on purpose or not, it's there. So you could be a-hole factor number one. You tweet them and say, follow me back so I can send you direct message, which seems kind of like the etiquette around that is, it's out there. Like it's I believe that kind of action is frowned upon, generally speaking. And then you have people like me who look at the numbers and think, if this tweet has gathered this much attention, you know, the marketers and the people who are in the business of engaging people and of gathering an audience, you know that they're studying this.
Mhm.
They have to be. This is their job. This is what they study. This is what they do. This is how they get paid, by bringing attention, um, getting people to focus on a particular product or item. This is their job. And so, I put that hat on, and I have no experience there. I just have an interest and a fascination. And I'm like, okay, so this person's tweeting out something that seems really personal. We could go deeper. It could be their mother or their brother or their husband or their child. Okay. Like, and this is where when people become emotional and the person asking the questions is not emotional, that's where you start getting, you're being an a-hole. You're being mean. And it's like, I'm not being mean. I'm asking critical questions, because why did this person push this out if now they're not responding to people? They're not engaging with the tweet. There's reasons for that. You and I have talked about that. Okay, so why are they doing that? And number two, why is this tweet getting so much attention? And because it's getting attention, I'm going to take a look at why. What is going on here? Because I've seen what I perceive as powerful tweets that get no attention. And then I see a semi-influencer, quasi-influencer tweet something like that, and it goes viral. So it gets me thinking. So I think I may have strayed from the original discussion that we're trying to have, because I have a hard time not being blunt about what I want to say. So let me see if I can package it in a way that is critical, respectful, and not as blunt as I would like it to be. If you're going to tweet out that someone in your family has passed away, especially these days due to COVID, what are you looking for? Is it a confessional? Is it that this is weighing so heavily on you that you need to get it out somehow? Is it that? Is it that you feel so comfortable with the tool, the social media tool, that it's part of who you are, part of what you do every day, that it's just that it's normal for you to put that out there? Or is it something less authentic? That, yeah, of course you're bothered that you've had a loss in your life, but this is gonna help you feel good, because when you tweet that out and it's got eyes on it and it's got attention, you're going to get some of that. You're going to get, I'm really sorry. You're going to get, tell me more. You're going to get, hey, if you want to talk to me, my DMs are open. You're going to get all kinds of responses that are going to make you feel good. And also, but you're also going to feel good that something you've put out there is popular. And that's the a-hole factor, because God forbid anything positive comes to your ego during a time like that.
Hmm.
I say that because there are people out there that their ego leads them no matter what. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying, let's acknowledge that it exists. It exists. Because if you and I talked last week about, the follower count, right? And I sent you a couple more of those this week. Someone's like 15 away from 2,000 or something. Like, I need 15 more. Like, okay, we've talked about that. It makes you feel good. There's something there that engages you at a level that it just engages you, and you're like, it feels good. It's like an accomplishment. It's like gamified, right?
Hmm.
And I think, unfortunately, this can be gamified too. This can be gamified too. And I don't think people are purposely gamifying it. Some might be. I don't think people are. I think there's reasons why they're pushing it out, but it's become, how many have I sent to you over the last year? Like, it's become a thing. It's a thing now. People are just tweeting out about, and not, what I'm sending you are extremes. Like, people are tweeting out about death, and COVID's the big thing right now. But the one tweet I sent you made me laugh because it was a person whose relative wasn't that close of a relative, and it wasn't due to COVID. And this person said that in the tweet. So and so has passed away. It wasn't due to COVID. So it's like they took away the relationship piece of the death. Then they took away the COVID piece of the death. And you'd think that they stripped away any like popular interest that somebody in their life has passed. But no, the layer that killed me was this person's an influencer or quasi-influencer. There's no reason for them to push this, in my opinion. It came from their like business account, and it got views and it got traction because this person, when they tweet things out, usually gets traction. So I've been sending it to you as a, what is going on with this? Is this now the new fluency within this social media tool that you and I use for a particular reason? Is this a thing? And we've talked about it. I've said to you, like, if somebody around me dies, should I tweet it out? Because I'm telling you right now that my initial gut tells me that I wouldn't. It depends. Like, there's context, right? Like, I don't think people are on Twitter would care if my mom died. I don't think I need to tell Twitter my mom died. And we talked about this. For me, I would tell my Facebook friends, because Facebook for me is a more intimate place. Facebook for me, I talk about Facebook as, I liken it to my basement. I'm going to invite people into my house. They're going to sit in my basement. We're going to hang out. We're going to say things we wouldn't say in public, right? There's a intimacy there in my house. That's my space, and I have you in my space. But Twitter is like going to a bar or a nightclub. You walk in, you dance, you have some beverages, you meet some new people, you turn around, you're out. Why am I going to go into a bar and yell out to everybody, my mom just died? And even if you think about the way that I've put it, what kind of people go to bars? People who want to have a good time. Sad people don't go to bars, or maybe they do, and that's where they go to try to distract themselves from their sadness by drinking, dancing, meeting new people.
Yeah, and connecting.
Connection.
Yeah, and this is I think this is where the couple different things you've lit me up on. I often go back to a conversation I had with Roy and Lee, and he talked about how initially when he started using socials, and Royan, this is such a distilled version of our conversation, but I'm going to try and I'm trying to pull the memory out to sort of share this. So this is beyond a paraphrase. But he sort of addressed that when he first started using socials. He said something similar to you, that it was the party that was already going on, and you're arriving and the party's already there, and you sort of do things to kind of like make yourself noticed. And he said he shifted out of, and so that was his starting point. And then along the way, he kind of learned that the relationship part was more important than the party part. So he said his consciousness was raised, and he started to realize that in order to be there, I had to have a deeper sense of who I was connecting with. So he sort of went from this broad band to narrow band, and then very much kind of anchored himself in some, authenticity, and what he felt was his creative voice and his way of connecting with people. I think in a lot of ways he's harmonized the duality of digital self and real self so that he can trust both sides together. And if I'm fortunate. I follow him on Insta. I also follow him on Twitter. I've read his blog, but in a lot of ways I can see how these tools represent his whole self. There's no light seeping in between the spaces. Like, there's overlap and connectivity. So what you're talking about as far as that relationship building and what's already going on there, I get that. And I think that, there's times where I still get swept up in that. I sort of recognize that I can because I use that open space to sort of, I'll drop my poetry in there, and I bug bomb there, and I just walk away. And then some people message me back, other people don't. I don't, whether the pieces that I write or the creative pieces the art pieces that I create, my intent is to get into a conversation, but I also recognize that, you can walk. I remember the clubs that I went into as a kid in university. You could walk into the middle of the club, the middle of the dance floor, start screaming, and no one's going to hear you, right? Like, there's a guy screaming. He must be having a good time. Like, it's until you actually intently turn to someone and scream directly at them that you start to build that relationship. So that's sort of like when I think about often sometimes with the poetry, is that it may be a loud piece, but it's being dropped into an even louder room. So probably only the people close to me really notice, or other people amplify it. So I'm kind of jumping from dance floor to dance floor with some of the stuff that I'm creating. It's my first thought on that. The second thought is around one of the tweets, and I didn't shove it your way. I'm going to try and find it again, but it was someone that had spoke of their son who is about to go into surgery, and in the body of the tweet, it said the words, my family is basically ready to go. We've got all our support systems. We're in the best possible care right now. My son is going in for some sort of a surgery. And then the last thing, send me your prayers. And as I read it, I thought to myself, this became a little bit more interesting to me, because it seemed from the body of the actual tweet that all the necessary local supports were there. This was a compassionate frame that this particular person was existing in, with all the supports that they needed. And then there was still the request. So I personalized that. I'm going to center it. I think to myself, if I had all the supports that I needed and I was in the best place possible, what would motivate me to put a tweet out like that then? Am I actually, for me, I wouldn't feel any deeper reinforcement in the health of my child. I wouldn't feel a deeper connection with my family. And I definitely wouldn't have a sort of a more confident sense of the healthcare system to support me. So I think this is the other shape of these sort of confessional type social media posts. My brain, when I read them, I then look to see, does this person also have some sort of a product or a brand that they're posting out through? Because the privilege that they seem to be suggesting in the tweet is kind of being doubled down upon by the fact that there's a consultation thing that's associated with it, or there's an edu tool, or there's a book in there. And I think to myself, like, how do those two things coexist? I do believe that compassion and connected relationships can be built through social media. I like the idea that there's this open opportunity to participate in compassionate use, and people are willing to be vulnerable and just speak their heart online. And so those things, and it's an and I see people using it in a way that I think that it's being used as a marketing tool, because no matter the way that post is being used or shaped, there's more followers that jump on afterwards. I have yet to see anyone lose followers for a compassionate sort of like ask. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it. If it's happened, I'll stand corrected, but I haven't seen it. So this is where this is when you mentioned the new fluency, the space in social media that's starting to become more and more visible, I think, in more different spaces. And, I posted out a tweet, I don't know, I think it was still back in May. And I just asked, would you ever post up? I have to start hashtagging these things so I can go back and find them again. But would you ever post up, and I kind of put 3 or 4 different things. And they were these sort of like the deep secret kind of confessional things. Would you put this to social media? And for the most part, the people that responded, and I got less than 30 responses, they said no. Like I wouldn't go there. I wouldn't go there. So I don't know how to string this one together. I just see it in my EDU feeds. And, we had a conversation that was kind of adjacent to this with a couple peeps talking about followers and what's the value. We talked about this last week, I think, the value of followers. I think there's some, I don't have the brain to kind of connect the dot between what's the value of 5,000 versus 10,000 versus 15,000. But I think there's some space where these two conversations kind of fit together somehow. And maybe the marketing is the middle ground. Maybe that's the glue between the two. But it's cold, man. Like I feel cold kind of like calling it out and sort of observing it. But I do wonder.
Well, the last one you talked about, the person whose relative was in pre-op.
Yeah.
And like it struck me. That's why I sent it to you. I was like, you have everything you need. And asking for prayers, like I'm cool with that, because I'm a faith-filled person. I pray and I pray for people. But it was just weird, right? Like it was just that one hit me hard because that user strikes me more of like those tweets tend to be a little bit more polished and thought through. There's a difference there's a difference for me. And that user who I've run into a few times, just their stuff hits me and it looks polished. And I was like, this is interesting. This tweet is polished. This tweet has been thought through. This tweet, I don't believe, now, obviously it's just my opinion, I don't believe that this tweet is coming from a place of despair, right? It was like, it was a kid. My kid's going into surgery. Send me prayers. My family's all here. Everything's all good. There's a difference between that and somebody posting, I have no friends. Nobody's with me. I'm in a place where I don't know anybody. And my partner is in surgery. Like there's a difference there. And so I want to use the word privilege. There's a privilege there. This person knows exactly what they're doing. And I say that based on their other tweets that are polished and effective. Because like I told you, I've done my homework. I've studied what works, what doesn't, what's supposed to work and what's not supposed to work. And I've played around with tweeting more polished tweets and less polished tweets and tweets that were strategically tweeted and tweets that are not strategically tweeted. Like I've done it all to have fun with it and learn from it. And so this person strikes me as inauthentic. And what upsets me is that not only is it inauthentic, but they're using their child to gain traction. Right? Because that pulls the heartstrings. A kid having surgery, man, and I feel like a jerk even saying it.
People get called out on that, though. I've seen people get called out on that. That using the kid as a vehicle to sort of promote brand. So I have seen people call other people out on that.
Well, I would say something to this person because based on what I've seen from them, it was a strategic tweet.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to go back and check and see. I think you and I talked about this. We were going to go back and see what kind of traction it did get.
Well, I did for a little while, and the follower count was going up and up,
Okay.
and
So
it did. And I think, you know, I think the fact that, I mean, I know you had shared one with me. The one that I was thinking of was something that actually happened a few months ago. So there's a genre. I think this is where it becomes kind of interesting. There's a genre of confessional tweet or social media post that is starting to pick up momentum. Marketers are going to look at this. Of course, they're going to look at this. Like this is how marketers kind of just start drooling if they can get your attention. Like that's finding new ways to get and hold your attention. Like that's part of this element is the attention seeking, and it's so insidious. Social media breeds attention seeking behavior, and it's good to admit it. I think it's also good to sort of good to be able to talk about it, right? And that attention seeking, I guess, with the particular post where it seems like all the sort of services are right there for the person and yet they're still attention seeking. So it kind of tips a little bit for me.
Interesting phenomenon. You know, I find it fascinating. It's like sometimes I think I would have loved to get into this type of work, but then I think, no, I wouldn't, because it's just not, I like the fun parts of it, and not all of it's fun, not all of it's interesting. And social media is quite the unpredictable beast, because, and
Yes.
I've heard marketers, and I've heard people who are into design and video creation and editing and things of that nature. I've connected with them, and they've told me that they are always looking for the secret bullet. What is the magical recipe that leads to a viral piece of digital creation, whatever that is? What is the recipe? And the answer is the same every time. There is no recipe. They look and they try to find predictors, and it just, 1 minute you think you have something, and then you don't, because there's so many layers that people don't consider. They don't consider the audience in front of them. Who is the audience? What is happening around that audience at that particular time? Like there's all kinds of things, right? It reminds me actually of the podcast I listen to where the host will talk to like a former special operations military type individual who's no longer in the military, particularly the SEALs, and they'll say every time, what makes a good SEAL? Like, how do you become a SEAL? And the answer is always nobody knows, because you have people come to SEAL selection and they were all-star swimmers and they're marathon runners and they're this and they're that, and they're out after like 3 days. They're like, I quit, can't do this. And then you've got like this motley crew of people at the end who are left over, who for some reason were able to get through that torture and that pain and the agony of the training, of the selection process. And every time they're like, what makes a SEAL? They're like, we don't know. If we knew, we wouldn't tell you. We'd use it to become rich. We'd find these people. And it's like, it kills me, but it kills me in a good way. It's like this mystery of how do you make these things happen? Because we're so used to taking things and systematically breaking them down or building them up in order to figure out how things work. And when you can't do it, it's so mind-boggling that you either let go of it or you just keep working on it. So
imagine being an early Twitter user. Imagine jumping on board as an early Twitter user. So without really any understanding of, you know, the tools, it's just a way to connect with people. And you actually that's your first or second tweet. You put out there that your family is going through something momentous and life-changing, and imagine nobody responding. And I think we start to sort of see the kind of like the dark and light of this space, right? Like if you really are, like if it's not as much a tool, it is a place. And you're walking into that really loud nightclub and you're in pain and you're looking for some support. And the music is just like right over, like just steamrolling you. That's a really lonely and scary place. I mean, on one hand, it plays into often, I don't know if you've had this conversation. Individuals are like, yeah, I spent the first 2 years trying to get someone to talk to me on Twitter. And then you see someone drop one of these confessionals, and you're like, oh, maybe that's how. Maybe I'm not pushing enough. Maybe I'm not sharing, as intense enough in order to get people's attention. Someone just looking for a little bit of conversation. And that's what they're comparing themselves to. So the confessional.
The confessional. The confessional.
That's all I got, dude.
Well, we have to shut it down today a little early, but
yeah, I got the family text. I'll share. It's the family text. We're digging into a great conversation, and I get a text from the fam like saying, "Hey, we decided to go to the farmers market. You in?" And I'm like, "That's how we roll here, right? If the family." That's one of the tenets of the Coded podcast.
Well, we're parents first,
yeah,
right? Parents and partners first, even though it doesn't always play out that way. That's what we are.
It's the aim.
Parents, partners, teachers, buddies.
Dad. What do you want to put it? Dad is the brand. Dad is the overarching. Dad.
I have to say, it was interesting meeting your family.
That was awesome having it in the backyard. That was awesome. I love that you got to see some of the energy of my 2 kids and Karen being able to come out and finally put, my imaginary friend into this dude's a real person. So,
it changes things, eh? It's kind of weird. It's kind of weird, but it's pretty cool. Like, it was nice to, and I'll never forget the way you put it. You're like, when I was like, okay, I'm going to be in this space. I'm close to Newmarket. Should we get together? And you're like, yeah, but you're like, but you need to come to my house. The family wants to meet you. Yeah. They want to know who this make-believe guy is. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. That's not a problem.
It's important. And I'll tell you, this is the wraparound to this confessional episode, let's say, is that is the intention. The intention is to get to that place where you can actually be in that conversation face to face, real time, standing in someone's backyard. I would say, you know that using your socials worked when you can arrive in that space. You know that you showed some vulnerability, and you know that you managed to make connection with people that are, good to you and fascinating to you. Like, that is the wraparound right there, to stand in the backyard. Like, so I believe
it. Well, thanks for the wraparound. I don't know how ready I am for that, but I do know, like, for my wife, when I start talking about people using their names and like using their names and talking about the discussions we're having, that's a whole other level for me.
Yeah.
In my house.
Yeah. I'll give a for instance, like, your name has come up in our house without me mentioning you first.
Oh, interesting.
So that's how I know that you as a human are included in the operating system here.
That's funny.
Yeah. Or it's just a thing, right? Where other people start to, it's kind of like, I don't know if you remember from high school, your significant other, when they kind of go from, are you going out with so-and-so on Friday night? And instead, one of your friends says, hey, are you going out with, insert their real name? And you're like, okay, so now you're saying their name. So obviously you're sort of accepting them as included. So.
Agreed. Okay, well, you have a great day. Oh, that's interesting. Chris is showing us his artwork for today, the picture, and it looks like, if you look at it in one way, it's a heart that's broken, but from a different perspective, it looks like two heads that are laughing, laughing, and all the little thing, are those ones and zeros that are floating in and around the heart? Okay. Interesting.
So
my heart hurts that you've not been able to gather all your artwork and send it to me. But I know that's not it just hurts because that's a project I would like to delve into. But
it's gonna be my magnum opus. When I can finally get all those pictures into one space. It's coming. The coffee table book's coming.
Okay, code word.
Oh yeah.
I want you to use the word from your poetry. The P word.
The P word.
Pediculous or
pediculosis.
Code word is pediculosis. Yeah, and before you go, I have a minute here. I'm going to use it. Brad heard the episode where we talked about Brad, and I laughed so hard when in his tweet he quoted me. I created future Brad.
That's awesome.
So I literally laughed for like a good 3 or 4 minutes before I finished reading it, and I was like, that's awesome. Roland created future Brad. Anyway.
I think Chef would probably be on our short list of guests that we would never have on this podcast.
Yeah, you know what? We should talk about that sometime. The guests that we would never have on the podcast.
Yeah,
because there's a number of people, but I don't want to crack that. I don't want to crack that glass. Yeah, so we've only ever had one guest, and it was by mistake on the fly.
Yeah, and I think it was because they asked, they're like, "Hey, what are you doing?"
Yeah, and you're like, "I'm doing a podcast. Jump in here."
Yeah, live. Okay, man.
Have a good one.
You too. Be well. I'm sure I'll be chatting with you soon.
For sure. Enjoy the market.
Take care.
See ya.